Okay, I am now going to read to you some questions and answers asked to Walter Russell, and this is concerning the North and South magnetic pole. God is the one still light. Creation is an extension, retraction of stillness into simulated motion. Question: if every creating thing has a north and south magnetic pole, which way should one sleep to get the most benefit from charging his body? I assume that a man has a north and a south pole at his head and feet. Does he? Answer: it makes no difference whatsoever to one's health whichever direction his body points. The poles of a man are not at his head and feet as they would be in a bar magnet. They are in every cell of him. A man's body is composed of countless millions of little spherical cells. Each cell is centered by the still magnetic light of God, and that stillness is extended to the surface, culminating in two opposite poles. That center and its extension is the still center of the shaft, upon which the two opposites of electricity, charge and discharge, each integrating, disintegrating mass. A shaft moves around its center, but its center never moves. Motion is an extension of stillness in all creating things. Question: do the north and south poles in the separate spheres, which comprise a man's body, all point the same way? And if they do, why would there not be a big north and south pole for the whole man at each end of a man, just as there is in a bar magnet? For a bar magnet is also composed of separate particles. Our science textbooks tell us that the atoms of a bar magnet all point the same way. Answer: textbooks on science are not infallible. North and south poles of particles, whether of man or of a still magnet, do not all point the same way, nor are they parallel as described by textbook diagrams. All atoms are arranged in systems like our solar system. All of the poles of the various planets vary in their tilting the further they get away from the sun, until they gradually turn upside down, as our outer planets do. Mercury, the nearest planet, has an axis which is parallel to the sun's axis, and its equator is an extension of the sun's equator, and in the same plane. That is the only one in the system like that. Question: why is the axis of Mercury alone parallel to that of the sun? Answer: because Mercury is newly born. All planets are born on the equators of their central sun. Question: why are planets born from equators of suns? I have heard it said that planets are ejected from sunspots by some violent eruption. Is that true? Answer: no, it is not true. Also, it is said that planets are pulled from the sun by some other sun passing near. That also is not true. The manner of a planet's birth is as follows. Suns generate by the way of their poles and radiate by the way of their equators. Great rings of radiation are thrown off from their equators. These rings condense into planets by polarization. The moons of Saturn are condensations from the radiation of Saturn. Its rings polarize and become moons of Saturn, just as the rings around the sun become planets of the sun, by polarizing and turning upon a center of their sun instead of upon the sun's center. Turning upon a center of their sun instead of upon the sun's center. They thus create a new center of gravity, which is an extension of the sun's center of gravity. Question: what do you mean by creating a center of gravity? Answer: whenever a whirlpool of motion is created anywhere, the center of that whirlpool is a point toward which everything in that whirlpool is pulled. A whirlpool pulls inward from within as it spirals toward its still center. Gravity is that effect, caused by spiral motion pulling inward from within. Question. You say that every effect has its opposite. What is the opposite of gravitation? Answer. The opposite of gravitation is radiation. The center of gravity is also the center of radioactivity. While gravity pulls inward from within, radiation thrusts outward from within. Gravity is an electric charge, while radioactivity is an electric discharge. Question. Just what is meant by charge and discharge? Answer. To charge is to increase electrical potential, which means to multiply pressure. To discharge is to lower electrical potential, which means to lower electrical pressure. Charging is positive and discharge is negative. Question. You say discharge is negative. What then is a negative charge? Our textbooks tell us that some particles, like electrons, are negatively charged, while others are positively charged. Answer. There is no such effect in nature as negative charge. To charge means greater pressure, while discharge means lower pressure. Lesser electrical pressure is the opposite of greater pressure. Therefore, the opposite of positive charge is negative discharge. One in a condition of filling, while the other is an emptying condition. The term negative charge is as impossible as it is meaningless. Question. Is there any relation to that effect of emptying or discharging when we say a person is very negative? Answer. Yes, indeed. A positive person is concentrative like a positive charge of gravity, which pulls inward from within, while a negative person scatters or negates or destroys every positive constructive ideal. A negative person will always say it cannot be done, while a positive person will believe he can do anything he wants to do. Question. Isn't a negative person possibly just more conservative, more wise, perhaps less apt to rush into things headlong? Answer. No. Negative means to negate, to void, to expand or undo that which has been done. A negative person voids his own success by undoing the works of others or by obstructing them. If he has a good ideal, he broods over it until he sees so many hurdles that he does nothing at all. He sees all hurdles as insurmountable, while a positive person expects to find hurdles in every ideal, but believes all hurdles are surmountable. In fact, a positive person gets a great kick out of surmounting hurdles. Question. You said a few minutes ago that the suns or planets charge through their poles and discharge in the plane of their equators. Also, you said that a man does not have poles at his head and feet. So how does man's body charge and discharge, or in what direction? Answer. To charge means to compress or condense into higher pressure. It means to accumulate a large volume into a small volume, like compressing a gas into a solid. Conversely, to discharge means to radiate a solid back into liquid or gas. Positive charge makes matter visible, while negative discharge makes it invisible. Positive charge winds up light waves to create the visible universe of form, while negative discharge unwinds them to disintegrate the visible universe and make it become invisible. That is what science means when it says that matter comes from space to become visible solids, and space then swallows up matter to make it become invisible ethers. Now consider the sun. It is solid near the poles, where its charge is maximum, and molten liquid near its equator, where its radiation is maximum. It charges through its poles in the direction of the still center of gravity by pulling inward from within to compress a large volume into small volume. It discharges from its still center of gravity by thrusting outward from within to expand small volume into larger volume. Take note of the fact that the direction of charge is inward toward the still center of any whirlpool of motion, which all matter is. Also take note of the fact that the direction of discharge is outward, away from that still center. Now, when you try to compare the charge and discharge of a sun with man, you must realize that the sun is turning on its axis as a whole, but a man is one unit of a planet upon which he is turning with the planet. Let us now answer the question you asked by applying the principle. The still point of concentrated power, which corresponds with the sun's still point of gravity, is the very center of man's heartbeat. He charges his body in that inward direction and discharges his body from that same point, but outward instead of inward. He charges his body electrically by the electric current of his breathing. Now you must know that an electric current is a series of waves, and each wave is a pump. A wave is a lever which oscillates upon a fulcrum. When you breathe in and out, you are pumping electric energy toward and away from the center of your heart. Question: don't you mean lungs instead of heart? No, I mean one's heart, for the heart is the generator of power for the whole body. The lungs are an extension of the heart, just as any wheel in a watch is an extension of its main spring, from which it borrows its power. The heart is the fulcrum from which the lever of motion extends to countless levers and fulcrums throughout the body. All expressions of power anywhere are traceable to a common source from which all creating things borrow their ability to manifest power through motion. Remember this, however, that the power is not in the motion, it is in the stillness of the fulcrum. Question: will you please explain that idea more fully? Could you give us a concrete example? Answer: yes. Take any action whatsoever, such as a man lifting a trunk. His entire body is a system of fulcrums from which levers extend. His fingers, his elbows, his hips, knees, ankles, toes, even the ground beneath his feet are fulcrums for the whole body. Unless the man's feet were not upon the solid earth, or an extension of it, such as a building, he could not lift anything. That still point where man's feet touch the ground and acts as a fulcrum for him to lift the trunk is an extension of the center of gravity of the earth, for that point is the only point of stillness on this earth. The earth's center is stillness, however, is an extension of the sun's still center, and that is also an extension of a still greater nebular system. So God is the source of all things and the motion of all things. All things extend from his cosmic stillness, and his cosmic stillness centers all of his extensions. To quote the Divine Illiad, "For behold, I am within all things, centering them, and I am without all things, controlling them." The thought of most value for you to remember is that in any system of extensions, the power to manifest the source lessens as its distance from a source increases, and multiplies as its distance to its source decreases. Question: please give us some examples in nature which demonstrate this law. Answer: all nature manifests it. There are no exceptions. The sun, for example, is the source of this whole solar system. Each planet extending from it has a lesser gravitative pull as its distance from the sun increases. That is likewise true of the radiative thrust, for both are always equal. Consider also the industrial system. The source or leader of it extends his power all down the line to the sweeper. Each extension of power is lesser the further it is removed from its leader. The same is true in the army or any other organization. If therefore you desire power, see to it that you are close to God, for He is the source of all power. Question. My husband is a nervous wreck. He is a violinist and people built a brass foundry near us, and the noises have so distracted him that he can hardly work, and I fear for his health. What I want to ask is how you can possibly sustain your statement that we make our own lives and are responsible for our ills. Other people make the noises that make him ill. We built a beautiful house in a quiet spot, and they came and made an inferno instead. Answer. If your husband built his house upon shifting sands, and the house washed away, would you blame the sands and the water, or would you blame your husband for poor judgment in building his house on sands? You would blame your husband, of course. You would say that he should have used better judgment. When you built your house, you should have protected yourself against such a nuisance by building in a zoned residential section. Otherwise, you took your chances. You cannot blame the foundry man. He had every right to build there. We all make mistakes or err in our judgment. When we do make a mistake because of our errors of judgment, we have made our own life, and no one can be blamed for our own errors. But when we make mistakes, we should rectify them calmly and with dignity. Your husband could either sell his house or walk away from it if he could not sell it. He was not compelled to stay there and become a nervous wreck. He himself made himself a nervous wreck, and nothing can cure him but his own decision to calmly meet his situation and overcome it with dignity. I cannot see it in any other light than that he made his own illness by his own decisions and actions. Question. For years I have wanted to learn how to concentrate and meditate, but have been warned against meditation without a guide. It is said that that particular path is strewn with the wrecks of people who become mentally and emotionally unbalanced due to their lack of understanding. I would appreciate it if you could give me some clue as to how to meditate. Answer. To have been warned against meditation without a guide is utmost absurdity. To meditate is to become one with God. It means to stop thinking and thus get out of the awareness of body. One can be aware of his body and of material things only while and because one is thinking. You use the term concentrate and meditate as though they were the same. To concentrate is to think very hard and focus your thoughts to a point. To meditate is just the opposite. It means to expand one's thoughts into space until one stops thinking and steps into the still light of knowing. Thinking is sensing, and sensing is vibratory motion. Conversely, meditating is becoming still in order to talk with God. When I say talk with God, I mean become inspired with His light of all-knowing. One talks with God in timeless light. Inspiration comes in flashes of still light, invisible light. If you want to know anything whatsoever, just desire to know it, then stop thinking. Try to get into a state of universal ecstasy, or inner joyousness, which is a state of consciousness likened to the God mind. Void your mind of thoughts, thought forms, and ideas. Become perfectly blank insofar as ideas and form are concerned. In that manner you become transformed from man as an individual unit of mankind and become all soul, the universal soul. In that manner you make the transition from the state of sensing some things materially to knowing all things cosmically. You certainly do not need a guide to keep you from trouble for doing that. The great geniuses of the world do that constantly. It is their very life. You would as well need a guide to teach you how to love your mother as to need a guide to help you seek the light which centers you. Question. What do you think was meant by saying it was dangerous to meditate without a guide? Answer. It must have referred to cultists who go for phenomena, such as spirit rappings and table liftings. People do get so deeply immersed in the unnatural and miraculous happenings that they become mentally deranged, but ignorance of nature always lies behind such practices. Also, the eternal ego of man lies behind it. Many people like to think that they are occult, whatever that means. People are given to daydream about doing miraculous things but never do anything at all, or who suffer from what is known as delusions of grandeur, are the ones who are like to feel that they are occult and can perform miracles because of it. This is the danger of taking up such unnatural things with such unnatural people. Question. It is reported that you said that science practitioners in healing must not express sympathy for the afflicted who come to them to be healed. I cannot believe you said such a preposterous thing. I know you will tell me it is not true. If true, please explain. Answer. I most certainly did say just what you have quoted. When you know the nature of the God mind, you will know that it is changeless. It is a continual ecstasy, the ecstasy born of constant giving of love, beauty, truth, balance, and the inevitability of his law, working at all times to manifest him. The God mind is not divided up into the changing emotions of sympathy, anger, wrath, hate, intolerance, or fear. If God were sympathetic with the self-afflicted, or angry because of anger in man, or wrathful because of disobedience to his law, then God would take on those qualities and be what they are instead of being superior to them. The science healer must know God in him, be God, in order to heal. If you, as a science healer, are sympathetic with an afflicted one, you take on his affliction instead of giving him your balance, as Jesus did to the afflicted. You might as well share anger, hate, fear, and worry as to share grief and sympathy. You had a nervous breakdown yourself 2 years ago for just that reason. You took on all your patients' ills because of sharing their ills. They should have passed through you and become perfected in their passing. Instead of that, they all touched you in their passing, and your patients were not benefited. Question. But does it not seem inhuman to be unsympathetic where there is suffering? Answer. Quite the reverse. It is godlike to cure one of an unreality by giving a godlike balance. By sympathizing with someone, you acknowledge the reality of the ill. The moment you do and you acknowledge its reality, you cannot help them. Question. Just what do you mean by godlike as applied to this case? Answer. To God, all things are taken alike, and that means an unchanging ecstasy. That ecstasy of perfection, of rhythmic balance upon which his universe is founded, is the God-mind condition always. That is also the only mind condition of one who becomes cosmically illumined with the light. It is weak to be human. To be godlike requires the strength which comes only with full knowing. The greatest among men are those who have enough of God's knowing to take all things alike. The weakest among men are those who absorb every emotion as a mirror absorbs light. Question. I began to see what you mean, but wouldn't such a person seem cold and heartless in the midst of grief and suffering? Answer. Love is never cold and heartless. When you give love and balance, you are giving the reality of God's perfection to one who has accepted the unreality and nurtures it. And if you have come to end grief and suffering, why should you continue it by becoming a part of it? Question. What do you mean by the words, and nurtures it? Answer. To nurture it means that you think it is so real that you want human sympathy and are comforted by it. That brings us back to your original question. Do you not see that you are helping to nurture it by sympathizing with someone? Do you not also see that so long as one wants human sympathy, he is nurturing the ailment, and so long as one accepts human sympathy, one wants it? Question. What did you mean by saying that one accepts sickness and other unfortunate conditions? Answer. I mean that most all people who are ill, or who are failures, or who have great misfortune, have not only manufactured those conditions themselves, but have accepted them as real and inevitable, and they are real and inevitable just so long as one continues to accept them. But the moment one refuses to accept them, they disappear. Question: will you give us a specific example to illustrate what you mean? Answer: yes, I will give you several, for they all have the same earmarks but vary in pattern. A shell-shocked soldier was sent to Bellevue for a checkup. From there he was sent to several places for 2 years, which was the period of time set by the doctors for his recovery. Having been so informed by the doctors, he believed that he was to be invalided for 2 years, and by that time he also believed that he would be well. Someone gave him a copy of The Man Who Tapped into the Secrets of the Universe. Upon reading it the second time, he suddenly shouted, I'm well, and got out of bed and asked for his clothes. Doctors and nurses tried to quiet him and get him back to bed, but he insisted that he was well and demanded his freedom. He held his hands out to show that they were steady and did not tremble. Read this book, he said, and you will see why I know I am well. In 4 days, they were obliged to discharge him as well by all their tests, and he started for the West to resume his old business. Before going, however, he called at my studio to tell me about it. What was it in the book which healed you suddenly? I asked. It was where someone asked you, had you ever known defeat? And you said that defeat was something which one has to accept, and if you do not accept it, you could not be defeated. When I read that, I suddenly realized that I had accepted shell shock. Sure, I was knocked out and found myself in a hospital bed. Nurses and doctors were talking about me, and a chart about me was over the bed, and they were saying I was shell-shocked and that it would take 2 years to cure me. And nurses rubbed my back with alcohol and tucked me in bed and were so sorry for me. Say, I was important. Never before had I been treated like that. Sure, I was shell-shocked, and I liked it. I believe I was in for a 2-year cure, and I accepted that as a fact. Just as soon as I refused to accept it any more, I was cured. No, you were cured, I replied, for there was nothing to be cured except your belief. There was nothing the matter with you except the wound which nature healed. And then there's more, but this is about to cut off. But anyway, I will put in the description bar the playlist for the reading of this book, which is the Divine Illiad 2. So look over in there. If it's not there, it will be, because it takes me a little while to get it edited. So this is the Dove Lady, over and out for now.